Speaking of ACT, are we gonna talk about
I think
a
Chewy.
certain interview?
I think Chewy. I had one of the cleverer headlines in this video that we're doing right now. Do you like
Oh yes.
the part that says the A in ACT doesn't stand for arts?
Oh, it
That's
stands
pretty
for
good.
arts hole.
Back to my
No,
radio days of
oh,
alliteration.
okay. So this article, viewers, if you haven't seen this article, immediately go and read it word for word. I read this during my lunch break, and the sharp turn halfway through had me cackling. It
We're not
is
gonna we're not gonna actually read all
amazing.
of it, but we'll give you a
I
little
would
thing.
love
So
to do a dramatic reading of it, but yes,
we
we don't
could
have time.
totally let's do that. Let's totally do that. Steve Braunius interviewed some no-name ACT person who he doesn't know called Todd
It's
Stephenson.
the photo as well is perfect. He looks like he's lost.
Yeah. And Todd Stephenson is the spokesperson for arts and culture. We're going to read you some of the conversation here. Do you want to do a dramatic reading? I can do questions, you can do answers, or shall I just read it?
No, just read it.
So Steve Braunius says this. So Todd, what an amazing first question. So Todd, I know really very little about you. Southland born and raised, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, lived in Sydney for 17 years, and now in Queenstown with a partner called Alex. Your hobbies include hiking. Why are you ACT spokesperson for arts? I don't know if Steve went in a bit grumpy, but that sounds like a pretty, okay. And he says, actually, it was a portfolio I asked for. I think arts and culture is important to a society. And when we were talking about who would be different spokespeople on different topics, I said I was quite interested in doing that. Steve Braunius, what's your experience or knowledge of the arts? I'm going to say, other than a consumer, very limited. It's not a good start. There's some parts of the arts sector I'm personally interested in, but yeah, it's an area I'm wanting to learn more about and I'm slowly getting to know. Steve Braunius.
Jesus Christ.
What parts are you interested in? Personally, along with my partner, I quite like musicals. So that's probably something we should go to when we have the opportunity, something we would go to. What musicals have you attended? I haven't for a little while, Steve, to be honest. As soon as someone says to be honest in the answer, it kind of means, this isn't a very good answer. I haven't for, and he says that a lot in this interview, I haven't for a little while, Steve, to be honest, but I think the last one I went to was Hamilton. I saw it in New York. Steve Braunius. I'm conducting the interview in my hat as the literary editor of books section at Newsroom. So what about literature? What's your experience or knowledge there? I'm going to be pretty straight up with you, Steve. I mainly read non-fiction, to be honest. So it's been a while since I've read a novel. I'm going to admit that. What's your non-fiction taste? Well, the last one I actually read was about the Labour victory in Australia. I read a lot of kind of political biographies, and I'm obviously interested in campaigns. What about New Zealand books? That's an area I want to kind of learn a bit more about. It's something I'm hoping to develop as part of being the arts spokesperson. I haven't actually got into talking to anyone from the literary community yet, but that's on my list of areas I want to kind of get to know a bit more as I get into this portfolio. It's quite hard to read actually because he's got them verbatim. Are there any New Zealand authors who you've read? It's been a long time, to be honest, Steve. I'm just trying to think about the last one I would have read. Can I come back to you on that? I'll give that some thought as we're talking. No one's coming to mind, not a single New Zealand author. Not immediately. Let me come back to you. Here endeth part one, Chewy. There is so much more. I'm going to read two parts. That's one part, Chewy. You want to respond to that to start with?
Oh my God, what a dreadful interview. I think, because I know that there's this huge tone shift coming from in this interview that really brings it to the forefront. But I think the first question is why haven't we heard from you? Like in the past, generally an arts and culture spokesperson has something to do with arts and culture. But yeah, who are you? and why. It's some really basic questioning there that he fumbled.
Mm-hmm.
And then your next red flag is when you can't name anything New Zealand arts and culture related. You haven't attended anything in the country. You haven't read any books. What is your interest in the arts? Now he gets into this. The interest is, I don't think the government should provide any funding for art,
Yeah.
which is just an absolute, like, because when you get into it, I bet there's things that they would fund. They would fund the ballet. They would fund the symphony orchestra. But they're not going to fund, what? Pacifica stuff? Māori stuff? Guarantee it. Absolutely guarantee it.
So let's look at that, because that's the next part of the conversation. So they've just been talking a bit about funding. It's extremely progressive in Australia. What's it all about? I haven't looked at the Australian funding, etc., etc. And this is the question. So far, your only press release statement on anything to do with the arts has been your condemnation of Creative New Zealand giving the Prime Minister's Award for Poetry to Tuisiata Avea, which you object to because of her poem about James Cook. Yes, obviously, you know,
here on the show.
I'm a very strong free speech advocate. It's so funny how these free speech advocates didn't like that poem so much and wanted it banned. But in that particular case, while she has the right to write what she wants, is Creative New Zealand supporting her something that most New Zealanders would see of value? That's the other thing about the arts. This is not like a moral majority to decide what is and isn't art. So it's not how it works. If you said that, what, does everybody like the certain kind of music which is deemed good enough to be? No, it doesn't have to be a majority to see if something's art. We've got to really ask ourselves, how can an agency like that actually represent the diverse, I suppose, views and what different New Zealanders would value? And, is it appropriate for them to be spending money on things like that? Are you aware of her body of work? I've read some of it. You've read one poem, haven't you?
I think he's lost the interviewer at this point. He's not an ally.
I've read a couple actually, but yeah, it's not something I would spend my time reading, to be honest. You wrote in the press statement about Tuisiata, with the new government looking to make spending cuts at low-value departments, Creative New Zealand is tempting fate. Can you expand on that? From ACT's perspective, we're really saying, are the individuals in these organisations representing what the majority of New Zealanders would want to see supported? Well, it's funny that we talk, because I don't think the ACT party is representing what the majority of New Zealand would want to see supported, but they're still allowed to exist, aren't they? I don't think that they can do that. People have very individual tastes, and so it's better that individuals make those decisions rather than, I suppose, a bureaucratic agency imposing their choice on New Zealanders. You didn't know, did you? Because that poem got sent to everybody's letterbox and inbox, and they had to read it and get back to the government about what they thought about it. Here's the question you like most of all, Chewy. But you don't have individual taste yourself, do you? You're kind of an arts ignoramus, really, by your own reckoning.
Amazing. I will buy this guy a drink.
The answer to that is no. I certainly have individual things that I like to go to. We talked about that earlier. You've been to see Hamilton. Well, I was just giving you an example of the things I like to do. What are your tastes other than musical? That's the main one in the creative sector. Musicals. I don't know if there was a question mark behind that. That's how I'm interpreting it. And I watch movies. I watch TV. I watch TV, says the ACT spokesman for the arts. Creative things are on TV. Are they not, Steve? Hear us end the lesson.
Now, someone, as someone that has tread the theatre boards in the past, can I just go on record and saying that musicals are the worst art? They are the worst one. No, I'm right. Yeah, look, art's a tricky thing. It's a subjective thing. And I think if you're going to be the spokesperson for arts and culture, maybe you should be able to articulate that thought at some point during an interview.
Can I offer something?
Great. Yeah.
Can I offer something? If the majority of New Zealanders like what you're producing in an artistic form, it doesn't need funding or support. because the majority of New Zealanders mean there'll be a big enough base for it to be supported. The stuff that actually needs funding and needs support is what get those off the screen, or we're ending this relationship right now, young man. It's actually the stuff that is provided to a niche audience, the stuff that's not perhaps liked by the majority that needs the funding, because we want to encourage all different kinds of art, even the stuff that the majority don't like. The stuff that the majority do like has a much better way or better place for it to be funded by the society that wants to participate in it. So actually, he's completely upside down.
No, Pat. The value in poetry is the money that we'll bring in sales. That's always been true. It's just, the reason why you should have someone that understands art or has been involved in the art scene as a spokesperson for arts and culture is understand the fundamental thing of putting on a production or spending a year writing a book of poetry or being in a band or these sort of things. There is no way that something like a symphony orchestra could ever turn a profit. But you go, it is worth it to have this in this country.
Yeah.
And traditionally, that's what we've done. We've gone, we need a national ballet company. We need a symphony orchestra. That's a sign of a real proper country. But that's a very European way of looking at things. When you open it up to all forms of culture, are we now talking about kapahaka? Are we talking about Pacifica expressions of artistry and that sort of thing? Are we talking about the fringe festivals and stuff like that? Putting on a play, you have to rehearse it for sometimes months. You have people, you have a cast. Where does the money and time from that come from? You have to have someone take a punt on it. And we've spent the whole show talking about how if you've got money to take a punt on something, buy a fucking house. Don't invest money in a musical.
Or a hoodie.
No, you don't do any of it. So, look, the real reason that this guy has stuck up his fucking hand and says, I want to be the spokesperson for arts and culture, is that his belief is the government shouldn't have anything to do with arts and culture. New Zealand doesn't need art or culture.
Yep.
And if we do, the profitable one will step forward. And so we won't have a symphony orchestra. We won't have any of these things. I assume that all forms of culture will be done by the All Blacks. Which, to be honest, I might buy tickets to their rendition of Swan Lake, but we'll see. But
That's
this is the thing. They want to chop government funding out of these things.
Yep.
And I think anybody involved in the art scene is absolutely fucking horrified.
Yep.
That this chump who watches TV sometimes, who saw a musical in New York at some point, and has not lived in this country for nearly 20 years, is now got an opinion on this sort of stuff. He's also, as pointed out in the chat, got record for being an absolute chump. Todd Stephenson was ex-Pharmac spokesperson during the election. He told Jack Tame that treatment decisions should be made with a productivity focus in mind. He worked for Verix Pharmaceuticals. So, yeah.
Now tell me
only
something.
Get medicine if you are economically productive to society.
This is him,
that man.
Is this him?
Yep, that's him.
Okay, so have a listen to this. This is hilarious, hilariously terrifying. He's talking about the diversity in ACT. You having a listen? Listen to the diversity in ACT.
But as I think I said earlier, I think ACT is wanting to deliver a really strong team to Parliament of diverse New Zealanders with different backgrounds. You've got people who are from business, farming, small business owners, people with
have I said farming?
Degrees in economics, and people who work in the corporate sector like myself. But as I think I said earlier,
that's ACT's list of diversity: business, farming,
wow,
small business owners, degrees in economics, the corporate sector. That is ACT. So my tweet today was so much diversity. business, farming, small business owners with degrees in economics and the corporate sector. That's his list of, and then you think about Tusi Avia's poem, but that's what he thinks of as diversity. Like there was people who owned a dairy and there was people who lived on a farm. How much more diverse do you need? Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo!